Hey there, welcome to episode 114 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I am your host, Managing Director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, Dan Hugo. If you're not familiar with the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, our purpose is to enable and encourage ideation, innovation, and implementation to make our communities better. To that end, we're a Nevada nonprofit corporation founded in June of 2022. We are a 501c3 public charity, also effective June of 2022, coming up on our 3-year anniversary. We actually started rebooting our organization from the original code for Vegas in January of 2022. So we're finally getting good at this, maybe. We'll see. You are always welcome to visit our website to learn more about our organization. Stay tuned for the links where I will mention that, where to find that. In the meantime, hopefully wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, a summary of today's episode, which I will read to you. And today is only the usual 4 links that are basically covering what we're up to in today's episode, titled Making Agile for Volunteers Go. If you're not familiar with Agile for Volunteers, don't worry. It's a new thing that we're working on. I have done at least 2 episodes previously over the last 113 other episodes. I think 2 or 3 times I've mentioned this before, some of the motivations and whatnot. So we're actually really intently focusing on this as our sort of enabling base initiative, a base technology, if you like, or a base methodology, collection of tools and methods. So it's very important, and it's getting the attention it deserves, finally. And so we'll talk about that today. The summary of today's episode, thus, one of the fundamental elements of our efforts is a way to account for and recognize the value of volunteer time, effort, and expertise as applied to our initiatives. And our experiment to accomplish this is something we call Agile for Volunteers. And this is how we are making it go. Making stuff go is like doing the work, making the plans, doing the work, testing it, starting over, or iterating, as we like to say. The links for today's episode, as usual. So if you've heard in previous weeks, it's the same 4, so you can probably skip forward if you like. The Innovate for Vegas Foundation homepage, located at innovateforvegas.org. That's FOR spelled out, innovateforvegas, all one word. .org. Actually working on adding a couple more pages. There's our how-to documents, our contributing guidelines, our code of conduct. There are various documents that are in our GitHub repository that are not automatically published into our website. So that's on the to-do list. Should be a little bit more complete, a collection of information, a bolus of information, if you like, about our organization, how we function, and so on. Our annual list is due at the end of June, so we're looking for possibly another board member or 2 to help tell the story, to add some more opinions and more ideas to the mix. And so we have until the end of June. So if you're interested, do reach out. You can email me, Hugo, DHUGO, at innovateforvegas.org if you're curious. Projectact.info, that's ACT, project-act.info. ACT is our autonomous cohort tessellation project. It's actually an initiative that we are pushing out to the world first. We're not, I mean, it only works if more than one cohort is using it. The autonomous cohort tessellation idea is to create a mosaic of cohorts of 1 or more people, putting their sometimes volunteer, time, effort, and expertise into civic volunteer initiatives and component projects so that they are discoverable, and to not only for normal people, for people who are just curious, hey, is anyone working on civic volunteer projects? Look at that. And then also to help the cohorts discover each other so that we might connect, communicate, and collaborate. The population of civic volunteers is not overwhelming, but it could be. So connecting people with similar notions focus on community elevation and so on. And Project Act does not need to be about civic volunteerism. It could be something that could be useful to connect, for example, Girls Who Code, the Hacktoberfest annual month-long outreach to encourage open source developers to take the plunge and become open source developers in various open source projects. The mechanisms to connect cohort, I said Girls Who Code because I know that some organizations can be difficult to locate. If they have chapters, there's always and the same problem with civic volunteer organizations now that Code for America sunset the brigade program. It can be tricky to locate each other. LinkedIn is far from ideal. So we're working on this, the connection between cohorts of various types. And we're making use of technologies that have been around for decades and are completely open and don't require any billionaires. So projectact.info, very early stages. It will actually benefit substantially from Agile for Volunteers if someone or any cohort would adopt something like that. But that's for another episode, another time. agileforvolunteers.org, the homepage for this very effort. There is a GitHub repository for an organization called Agile for Volunteers. So it is separate from Innovate for Vegas Foundation. It is intended to be a standalone initiative with different parts and pieces and documentation and different ideas to try out so that others might make use of it, extend it, improve it, and so on. We are obviously making use of it internally, so it has started out as an internal initiative. So that will all migrate over to Agile for Volunteers on GitHub and be visible in the agileforvolunteers.org website for the world at large, not writ large, at large, to take a look at, maybe try it out. Finally, Mastodon.Vegas, the always in the future beginning to our Munibits, social, smart social, and open data capture. MyMuni, Welcome, all of our initiatives that are focused on community elevation have a certain component that involves sharing information and connecting to the people in a community or communities, making use of decentralized, federated, open source software such as Mastodon will figure into that and interoperating with it with some of our other initiatives. So Mastodon.Vegas will be our toe in the water as we get that rolling. If we don't have Agile for Volunteers working, how can we possibly get all this other cool stuff up and running? So we're starting where we need to. But Mastodon.Vegas is an existing piece of software managed, maintained by a nonprofit I think it's here in the United States. I think there was a nonprofit component in its original German homeland, where the developers first started this effort several years ago. So we hope to collaborate with them in some way, but also deploy a geo-focused Mastodon server at mastodon.vegas. If you click on it right now, you'll get a GoDaddy parked page, I think, but coming soon. This is a deployment question. It's not a development question, but the interoperability and integration of Mastodon with our other platforms will be an integration, but we got to start somewhere. So mastodon.vegas, coming soon. Trademark. Coming soon, real soon. So let's get started with today's episode. Let's talk about Agile for Volunteers and what the challenge is. Why are we even doing this? Civic volunteerism, or volunteerism in general, always faces a challenge with most of the cohort of volunteers not having time, inclination, pure dedication perhaps, to stick with it or at least participate in a consistent way. I am not saying everyone does this. I am saying, though, that it is not uncommon. And nowhere is it less uncommon, which is more common, than in the world of civic volunteerism. I have spoken to several different of the remaining organizations out there across the United States. I am always looking to speak with more of them about how often people show up and remain dedicated and focused. And it can be a challenge. It can be a real challenge for those who are more committed, since there could be that asymmetry in how time is allotted and used, how the more consistent participants can work around versus with the sporadic participants, and so on. And this is something that I have also spoken with. The people that run welcome meetings, I have my office hours on Tuesdays, people who have a meetup group for new what is it? Newly joining? No, people that are curious, introduction, people that take their time to do that. And then they bring on one or two people that are, very interested in this. And then those people disappear. One might wonder, why do I spend the time on this? But we are always optimistic. But it can be a real challenge. Some people are committed. Some people are maybe in or maybe out. Depends. Everything is always more important. This is how volunteerism works. You can't really ask for much more. So that's the nature of the beast. So add two things. One, the fact that population of civic volunteers is not necessarily huge. And in some places, thanks to the sunsetting of the Code for America Brigade program, might be quite tiny. And this is the case in the greater Vegas area where even when we would have 20, 30 people showing up for our meetups each month, those were not that's sort of like the welcome or interested or thinking about joining meetups that I just referred to. People can show up to that in droves. And then if you say, okay, well, now we're going to do work on the weekend at our hackathon. Nope, nobody shows up. So it can be a real challenge. And the population of people that want to take the time may not necessarily be large. It might actually be shrinking. It's hard to say. And then the second thing, there may well be someone out there looking for a project to work on, even a little bit, or they may be looking around for how to start their own cohort of civic volunteers. How do they do this and how do they jump into the mix? And so part of Project ACT, by the way, started out as the Autonomous Cohort Transformation Project, which was to help then Code for America brigades become independent, standalone organizations. So essentially, we may be starting out from zero instead of existing brigade, but the same goal. How do I turn a desire to do something for the world into action? So the transformation component of Project ACT still there, but the tessellation has a more practical implementation path. The transformation side of it is a little bit more about connecting with people, which can be a challenge anyway. Being discovered for that is on the list. It's a marketing question. Not everything is on LinkedIn. So the idea is to make an initiative transparent, make the structure of their description, the initiative's descriptions and reasons and goals, and the details easier to navigate, easier to advertise for discoverability, and easier for people to participate in when they can, hopefully more often, in fact. And there is even more to try to make better when they can actually find these things, I'm only scratching the surface here. So possibilities of how to make it easier to discover and then wander in and say, oh, this actually looks interesting. Not where do I even figure out where the documentation is or who's working on what or what's going on here. So part of Agile for Volunteers is that transparency element, not only for people working on something, an initiative or a component project or something else, but people curious or people working on something similar where they are and then looking around for any ideas or possible collaborations and so on. So it's a sort of a canonical way of structuring things using a familiar terminology and familiar lexicon from Agile. So that's why we're starting with Agile. So the so-called Agile Industrial Complex has, and I like that term because it has a really negative connotation, which apparently is true, has undone some of the purism that drove the initial development of Agile over 20 years ago. I think it was February of 2020. No, I'm sorry, February of 2001? No. When was it? Now I got to look. I want to say it was February of 2001, but that seems, yeah, I think it was February. Agile meeting in Colorado, I think it was. Yeah, I can't remember. I think it's 2001. Yeah, February 11th through 13th. Oh, it's right there on the history page of the Agile Manifesto, of course. So they first got together, the initial, I think it was 13 people, and jotted down some ideas over the course of 2 days and then spent weeks continuing the conversation remotely, probably via email, and eventually hashed out the notion that has become the Agile Manifesto and the Agile methodology, which then over time was stolen and turned into a management tool, and it makes people unhappy and frustrated, and it makes them feel as though they're not productive. But that was not the goal of Agile. So over 20 years ago, they said, it was initially developed by professional software engineers, developers, aimed at professional software developers. So it was by programmers for programmers, to make production of quality outcomes, and software in this case, their main focus, with inclusion of the whole team in developing and iterating on project elements, including the customer, pair programming, and more. So they were looking at, how we want to do cool stuff. We want to release working, high quality software. We want it to satisfy our customers. We want them to be happy with what we're giving them. Why spend your time building things people don't want? So why not include them in the discussion? And sometimes we talk about this as co-creation nowadays. It's a good idea. Are we building what you want, especially if you happen to be the one paying for it? Or in our case, you're the people in our community that we would love to have you be impressed and happier, because our communities that's where we live. It's where we work. It's where we move around through the day. And if it's working better for everyone, then that will come back. So yeah, the idea is to come up with a way to turn the work day or effort spent on these things into more productive use of time, effort, and expertise. So that was the idea. And it didn't really get turned into that by some. They turned it into an opportunity to become an Agile coach, or to sell different Agile-oriented products, or to convince upper management that, hey, here's a way we can score people with story points, and we'll manage productivity and so on and so on. So it's kind of been corrupted a little bit. And anytime I've ever heard someone say that they are not happy with how Agile works, they usually point to one or two things. Commonalities, often the stand-up meetings are one of them. But the most important thing that has so often been lost in the shuffle is that Agile methodology was not intended to be a set of rules, which it has become, unfortunately, but a collection of ideas, most of them optional. As one of the founding Agile crew of that initial February 2001 gathering, he once said in a Twitter post, when there was some grumbling, as often happens every couple times a year at least, there was a comment about the meetings, the stand-up meetings being a problem. He often disliked daily stand-up meetings idea. He said, if you don't want to have meetings, don't have meetings. That's it. There's no rule that says you must have stand-ups. At the time, and this was in the pre-Zoom era, the pre-work from home era, they posited that in-person gatherings and eye-to-eye, face-to-face, the ability to interact in nonverbal, the ability to perhaps offer thanks in person in a group setting, hey, thanks for helping me out with that thing yesterday, or offering suggestions, that interaction is best done in person. And starting the day with a stand-up meeting keeps it quick, keeps it minimally invasive. It doesn't interrupt your thought process since you're starting the day. You're not working, stopping, having this meeting, then restarting. So you kick off the day with this meeting. But if you don't want to have it, or if it's not effective, or it doesn't work, or it's best between a couple of the people, but not everybody, there's no rules. These are ideas. The Agile ideas in the manifesto are not about forcing people to do things. It's about finding the best path to make everyone feel as though they're being productive, putting their time to good use. And how better to apply this than to volunteer time, which is a rarity, occasionally found, occasionally available, but not consistently. And you gotta hope for the best. So if we can make the most of that time with some of the methodology that was first established in Agile 24 years ago, why not? So we can start there. And always examining what works and what does not, it was part of the core principles as well. So, and that is again also often lost in the rush to follow the rules, to pay coaches and consultants to manage up with burn down charts and story points to impress the bosses while frustrating the workers. But why not just make the Agile parts that are working for your whole team the parts of Agile that you use with your whole team? And you should always, and it's somewhere towards the end of the to-do list. And since I have the manifesto page, I could probably, did I close it? No, there it is. I could probably go to that page, the 12 principles of Agile, right towards the bottom. Right, it's the last one, the 12th. At regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. The parts of Agile that don't work, get rid of them. The parts of Agile that need some adjustment, adjust them. Do you have some of your own ideas? Bring them in, try them out. And that's the goal of making Agile for Volunteers a public open source endeavor initiative in all of its parts so that others can try it out, give their opinions, see if it works, and we can go from there. Volunteers, though, it's right there in the name, Agile for Volunteers. Story points are one of the things that can get quite frustrating and are often misunderstood and misused in applied Agile. So we do away with those. Volunteers are not working fixed work weeks. They are not compensated for their time, not with cash anyway, with personal satisfaction and the knowledge that they've pursued a job well done. They need to find their own reasons and sources of satisfaction. Some motivation might come from the sense of accomplishment, some from response from the communities, maybe some from their colleagues collaborating on the work at hand. Maybe there's a general sense of, hey, thanks for helping me out with that part of the thing that I was working on. And hey, look, it works. Hey, look, it made things better in some way. What do we want to look at what we do want to look at, thank you, my own writing, is the idea of torques, or basically accounting for time, effort, and expertise in a way that matters only to the whole team internally, not used to report to anyone or account for anything. So there's no judgment, there's no graphing. There might be graphing, but it is not a tool to determine, and it's often misused. Now, the original idea for story points was to help with pacing. Torques is a pacing tool as well. The story points were intended to be used when they were when they were conceived as a way to determine how much should I bite off for this sprint or this iteration. Iteration is less suggestive that we're trying to run a race. So during the next interval, the next iteration of our Agile schedule, we're going to take some period of time, and I'm going to try to accomplish these set of things that, based on consensus, have been ruled to be a total of 35 story points. So at the end of iteration, you say, did I finish all 35? No, I can't. I finished the equivalent of 28 story points. Okay, so for the next iteration, I'll try for 28 story points. So it's a way to figure out how to make the most of my time, but I'm working, I'm at work doing this stuff. So it makes for predictable projects and whatnot. It can be turned into a cudgel. It can be turned into a way of judging people for how much they're not getting done and so on. It's a very squishy measurement. So it's used for prediction rather than assessment. So the torque idea is to make, and by the way, the person, I think it was a man, the guy who came up with story points is often disappointed with how they're misused and doesn't like the idea either. The idea with torques is to make time, effort, and expertise visible to the team so that one person is not working too hard. It's try to balance out what people are accomplishing, not to predict and then judge oneself like, oh, I came up 7 story points short. No, it's how much of my time, effort, and expertise that I spend on this thing. So it's kind of like time tracking, but you're not tracking. It's not meant to be a time clock. It's really meant to be a sort of a soft measurement of like, how much of me did I put into this during this, say 2-week period. And if time over time, if the team is looking and saying, hey, one person is spending a lot of their personal torque, and torque is the lever of expertise multiplied by the effort, and that's the torque, and then over how much time. So you could say it's over 2 weeks, but then you could be a little bit more granular and say, well, over the 2 weeks, I actually spent 3 hours. So we'll try to capture that in a way that's kind of helps to balance out, but it's not meant to be an assessment tool for project planning so much as a recognition of the time spent and to help with pacing so that we understand when people are maybe doing a little bit too much, like try to keep it balanced. Or maybe others on the team will say, hey, you know what, look what happens when you do put in that sort of effort. You get a lot of stuff done and there's a lot of learning to do and so on. So we'll have to see how that works. We're not committed to it. It's just like everything else in Agile for Volunteers, subject to iteration, debate, redesign, could even be removed completely, but it's just an idea. As well, since volunteer time is gold, it's hard to come by, it's rare. And since volunteers often have other responsibilities on which to spend their time, we break Agile iterations Those are sprints, but iterations is a less suggestive word. Break iterations into atomic team intervals so that someone on an iteration team is on an atomic team. They're on the team for the iteration time interval, so say 2 weeks, and then not otherwise. If it's a 2-week interval, great. After that, we do not assume that the person is available. Atomic teams, as we call them, are real for one iteration interval. They're atomic. They exist at the beginning and the end of the interval and not otherwise. Then they go away. Anyone can rejoin the next atomic team during the next iteration, but anyone can also disappear for a month, a year, or forever. This happens anyway, but we build it into the workflow. We assume that someone on an atomic team may disappear. If they disappear during the iteration, that is not desirable. That is someone who doesn't respect their fellow team members, their fellow atomic team members. So that would have to be, that's a problem. But if someone says, I'll give it 2 weeks, I'll give it a 2-week iteration, they finish some things. They don't have to finish everything. They finish a couple things. They decide this is not for me. Okay, you are an atomic team member. You came, you departed under good, on good terms. Everything's fine. Best of luck to you. And you're still a contributor to the project in a small way. So yeah, it's really just recognizing that people have other things to do and that volunteer time should be appreciated, especially for the purposes of not only attribution, but fairness to those who do spend their time and try to get things done. If you spend other people's time and don't get things done, that's a minus. So what about initiatives and component projects? This is another element of Agile for Volunteers that is helping to make it go. It's another page from the Agile idea book. We spend less time on specification, more time on blue sky ideation, discussion ongoing, and capturing these in a user story hierarchy to deliver what we hope to for our customers. So these are often members of our community, so it's probably people we're going to run into in person. An initiative is made up of component projects that could be software, hardware, documentation, user interface, media, websites, all of the parts. So initiative and project are things that you will hear about in the Agile lexicon. So trying to reuse some terms so that if you are familiar with Agile, they will sound familiar. But if you also start out with Agile for Volunteers and you move into the workaday world, you may hear some of the same terminology as well. We capture themes within the initiative, break those into epics, and epics are used to group features, general features and specific stories into functional blocks that we can work with on the iteration intervals so that we can make progress in a useful way, and so that the whole team, can have visibility with this transparency and see that, hey, we're making progress. Hey, we're actually doing something. Hey, my time is being well spent and recognized. There I am in the contributors list. Here I am contributing. Here we are making progress. That's pretty good. Hey, maybe I will sign up for another iteration. This was fun. When we approach the individual component projects with the implementation tasks, we can spell out what needs to be done in a granular way so that we are not trying to accomplish one big giant monolith. We factor the initiative into component projects so that component projects can be executed, implemented, can be worked on by different volunteer teams, different atomic teams. We also have the notion of persistent teams. Those are the people that stick around after close. They're the ones that sweep up afterwards, that help clean up after the celebration. They help put the dishes away after they wash them and so on. Those are the people that are going to help clean up the bugs and to figure out what we do next during the next iteration and so on. So if we can factor our initiative into component projects, make the component projects achievable, and then have themes and epics factored appropriately into features and user stories, and then group tasks on the component project side so that they address different features and user stories in the epic context over some iterations, one or more iterations. So that all sounds very complicated, but if you look at it as like a flow chart, it's pretty straightforward. Hopefully anyone who's interested in joining a project or who is working on it or who's working on it for one atomic team iteration will have a general map in their mind or visible that says, oh, here's what I'm working on now and how it fits into the bigger picture. The planning and implementation scheme is transparent, always subject to reexamination, and it is iterative. Not to mention, it's open to extension, right? So anyone should, and if this all works, be able to visit an initiative, look at the planning tree, visit a component project, visit the tasks and defects, and determine rather quickly if they want to be a part of this or if what we are working on might fit with what they are working on. Maybe they're somewhere else, or maybe some other interaction possibilities. So if you know where to look, I don't know if you go to the library. So often, many people do not. The library is not as popular as it once was. Sorry, I had to get some water. But if you go to the library, and if you're familiar with the Dewey Decimal System, you know, hey, I'm looking for biographies. I'm going to go to the 92 section. And there they are, the biographies. So if you know where to look, when you enter an initiative virtually that Innovate for Vegas Foundation is working on, you might say, oh, I'm looking for the user interface parts. I fancy myself a web designer, an HTML expert. Let me go to the UI, user interface, and see what the design is. Oh, what is this? They're implementing this user story as a informed user. I need to be able to accomplish this. Okay, I can see what they're trying to do. Oh, and their audience is interesting. Hey, I might add another case where it's somebody who is already familiar with this. Okay, so we can start growing the user stories to help develop a better user experience. If we can do this the same way, in a canonical way, across all of our initiatives, we could possibly invite people from outside of our organization to take some time now and then to participate. Maybe they don't have a civic volunteer organization near them, or maybe they want to start one and we can give them some ideas. That is the idea. And we want to make all this easier. The Agile for Volunteers initiative is our first attempt to make use of Agile for Volunteers to structure an initiative. It is sort of meta, but how better to try out ideas than on the ideas themselves by applying the method. You can put that in air quotes if you want. I didn't, but you could. By applying the method to the method we would like others to make use of, we can find the places where things are tedious, difficult, confusing, or maybe production by street, or maybe those which work well, they work great, or it could use some tweaking. So by using the method to build the method, we can see if the method really works and adjust accordingly. We sometimes call this eating our own dog food, which may or may not sound appealing. I didn't come up with that expression. The first time I remember really using it intensely is when we were working at Netscape. Everything internally at the Netscape company was web-based. So the web browser that we were working on was used to manage the development of the browser and also the running of the company. HR got an expense report, submit it through through the accounting web page for submitting an expense report. Got an HR issue, you can file an HR issue with the HR department on the web, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So everything was using our own products or eating our own dog food to enable the creation of our own products. I guess the creation of more dog food. Our initial use case for Agile for Volunteers is based on GitHub use. So we're building it around our use of GitHub and the GitHub for Nonprofits Teams feature. It's not only for nonprofits. The Teams feature is not only for nonprofits, but it happens to be free for nonprofits, gratis. So thanks GitHub for that. So it's possible that people will make use of that in that configuration, not required. Ultimately, we do not want to make that a requirement at all. We can make use of GitLab and other project repository platforms like BitKeeper, I think it is, and there are some other ones. Or maybe not. And by the way, GitLab, you can deploy your own. So maybe it's not even GitLab proper. It's the GitLab platform, but you deploy it yourself. Maybe not depend on this at all. Maybe we want to enable people who have a website or using just a general content management system. They shouldn't be required to sign up for GitHub or GitLab or any other such platform. They just want to be a part of a volunteer organization, or they're working on something. Maybe they're not even doing civic volunteerism, but they would like to connect their projects, their initiatives with the work of others and be discoverable so that people might join in and see what's going on. So yeah, we're not trying to limit the use of this. Obviously, we have to start somewhere, And then we'll try to make it easier for others to use it in other ways. So these is just a collection of ideas, not a collection of rules. You could argue, well, once you start writing software, that's kind of rules, but it's always up for extension or modification. That's the beauty of open source. And someone might come up with a completely different way of doing things. And that's also completely acceptable. Somewhere in there, some actual software tools, like I just was referring to, are documentation, the plans and tasks that make up the different parts of the Agile for Volunteers initiative are all open source and will migrate to the Agile for Volunteers organization on GitHub with the website mentioned in the links, so agileforvolunteers.org, kind of as a wrapper for that. So all these things that I'm talking about will be they're open now, but they will be generalized as a starting point for others to make use of and to contribute back to under that umbrella. So right now we're kind of developing it with we're developing Agile for Volunteers with Agile for Volunteers. It could be a little bit messy initially. So we want to publish or make open, more open. It's already open. You could go to our Innovate for Vegas, github.com/innovate-for-vegas/ov-agile-for-volunteers. And that's the overview component project repository with planning issues and some blue sky documents. And you can start from there and you can see what we're working on and how we're doing it. So once we get some basic wrinkles ironed out, all this should move to the Agile for Volunteers, separate organization. And then we would basically use our version of it so that we could tweak what we want so that it works for our organization, our teams, and we can upstream it. We can submit for others to look at and say, yeah, this would work. This would work for everybody. So there's no reason to make Agile for Volunteers a universal, you must do it this way, Agile for Volunteers industrial complex product. It's a collection of ideas, tools, methods, notions. If it catches on and it makes it easier for volunteers and people that want to participate in a fractional way in community elevation, civic volunteerism, hackathons, other challenges, projects, community outreach. If this helps, and our project act will be orthogonal, but it will benefit from this kind of a structured way of providing transparent information to people. If all of this helps people to get more volunteer participation, that will make more people recognize the value proposition and will help to elevate communities and will extend the reach of a particular volunteer organization beyond its locality and its collaborative outreach and communication connection. And then that collaboration can extend beyond their nearest neighbors. If all of these things work, then we will have accomplished our first of many goals. And all of this will happen by next week. I kid, but that's what we're doing. And so Agile for Volunteers is our foundational initiative. We have several other initiatives. There's too much to do for any one person. So ideally, some of the things that we're working on will be appealing to others beyond the greater Vegas area. We can collaborate across different types of initiatives. And if we make our initiatives transparent and visible and easier to work with, to find out more information, to figure out who's doing what, to figure out what I might be able to contribute to such an initiative or a component project, the better. And we'll go from there. So this is how we are making Agile for Volunteers go. And hopefully in so doing, we will help to enable our other initiatives to go as well. And not only ours, but the work of others. And if you know any civic volunteers out there, say, hey, they're trying to do important things often. And sometimes it isn't easy I always say, if you're trying to move a couch and your friend volunteers to help you move the couch, they got to show up. Otherwise it's nearly impossible to move that couch. And occasionally that is the plight faced by civic volunteer organizations. It's a numbers game, but people should take an interest. And one of the ways you can get people to take an interest is to show the value of outcomes. And the outcomes are achievable when you take a little time and spend it collaborating with your peers, so your whole teams, and interacting with your customers, which are probably members of your own community who might one day say, hey, that thing you worked on was really helpful, really made something better. And thanks for doing that. And it only gets better from there. That is where I'm going to leave it for today, because I got to get back to work on Agile for Volunteers. We're getting this moving. It needs to reach a usable state so that we can start doing some of our other stuff. And that's where we are. So that's where I'm going to leave it today. Thanks for listening as always. And if you do want to be involved in any way, start at our website, innovateforvegas.org, and go from there. Remember, we have office hours on Tuesdays. We have initiative meetups on Mondays. Those are on our gatherings calendar, which is, in of all places, our homepage. We stay away from meetup.com. That is an awful website. In fact, we're going to try to do something better than that. One of our initiative elements is to enable smarter smart cities to connect people. Okay, that's it. I'm going to stop talking now. Take care. Bye-bye.